Hello everyone. Well, it's time just for another update, mainly because I've seen several interesting videos recently which have a connection to each other of sorts, so I thought I'd go through that. And they are sort of connected into what's been going on with the sort of UFO and disclosure stuff. So yeah, here we go. So the first video I want to draw your attention to is, as you see, called UFO Physics of High Strangeness and Biological Aspects, and it's by Versadoco, which is a channel which has been around for at least 2 years, but I've never come across this before, and it's actually a chap called Norman who sent this to me, so thank you to Norman for sending me this. Now, this is quite unusual for a UFO documentary because it covers a lot of kind of deep stuff. I mean, you see here they feature Gary Nolan, who's talking about genetics and so forth, which is less usual in these UFO documentaries. Also, somewhere you'll see me as I'm trying to find it in the thumbnail sketch, um, they talk about, you perhaps saw it flash up there very briefly, Ken Shoulders and exotic vacuum objects, and they go into materials and stuff. And another chap that I know is in here too. He's in, there we go. So that's Ken Shoulders. He's mentioned a few times, and you see exotic vacuum object research is mentioned, which of course is mentioned in Where Did the Towers Go? So you can see some of the connections. They don't mention 9/11 in this documentary. Maybe they'll do that in another one. I don't know. I haven't seen it in the ones that I've watched. But this is a very worthwhile documentary to watch. It is quite techy in places, but it's connecting together some of the deeper stuff, and it's got some clips that I hadn't seen before, such as the interview with Jacques Vallée from the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, I don't normally watch the Joe Rogan stuff. Maybe I'll try and hunt this out and see if it's still available. Because Jacques Vallée is one of these people that he really does know a lot of stuff. I mean, the other person that's mentioned somewhere here, I think, is, there we go, you just saw him briefly, Hal Puthoff. He knows what's going on. He puts on this sort of neutral, gentle face, but he, has done work for the CIA, SRI. He was involved with Stephen Greer's original Disclosure Project, etc., etc. He pretty much knows what's going on with the black programs, and I'm pretty sure he will know who did 9/11 and what their connection is to SAIC and so forth. So he's in there. As I say, 9/11 is not mentioned. There's a discussion of ultra materials as well, and this is where Jacques Vallée is brought in as well. And there's all kinds of things in it. Very worthwhile watching. You might have to stop it and start it, to follow it closely. But I recommend you watch that because it is, to me, showing that some people are getting, the deeper UFO technological stuff and the sort of relevance to wider things such as energy and consciousness as well, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in a minute. So another of their documentaries, which is also, in fact, even more interesting than the UFO one, I think, because it seems to have a few more, if you forgive the pun, solid answers in there, or potentially anyway. And it's about, as you see, stone softening, precision cutting, transportation of megaliths, ancient techno magic. And here's an example of this. Where you look at these blocks, I think this is Cusco. I tend to get some of these sites mixed up. I think this is Cusco though, and there's Baalbek and several others where you can clearly see, for example, here, you've got this curved stone fitting into another, and they show, for example, other bits of stone that have been cut strangely, and they've got sort of marks in them, which seems to indicate that the rock has been molten at some point, and then solidified, but this doesn't involve heat. And there's even bits about different forms of intelligence and stuff. And again, this is all linked to EVOs, exotic vacuum objects. Bob Greenyer is in it. Coincidentally, I have a top just like that, or used to have. But it's very itchy around your neck. I wore that in a 2010 interview on Edge Media TV. If anyone wants to find that, it's just weird. And Bob also brings in the Hutchison effect stuff. There's a whole section on this in the Hutchison effect stuff, and how that's involved. How that's sort of made metals jellify and stuff. And Bob demonstrates this piece of aluminium and stuff. Behaving not like aluminium. Very, very interesting stuff. And then it brings in some research from Jack Houck about psychokinesis and PK parties from 1983 and how it was seen, they were bending forks and stuff, and Uri Geller's mentioned and stuff, and you see Hudson effect is mentioned. So this brings together a lot of the things I've been looking at, and it brings them together in a very good way. Again, doesn't mention 9/11, unfortunately, but I think they play one clip of Bob Greenyer alluding to 9/11, but he doesn't mention it in that particular clip. So they've sort of, I think they're steering clear of it to avoid censorship, perhaps. And then you get things like this with what's happened to this rock. It hasn't been melted by heat, but it looks like it's been molded with some tool. And then there's this limestone puddle, I think, that they talk about. And then they even bring in this discussion of consciousness and how consciousness may have played a role in them moving the stones and cutting them. And for example, there's coherent matter is talked about as a coherent matter beam, and they basically say that, or suggest that the way that the rocks were moved involved human beings generating EVOs interacting with an EVO field that's created with the stone, and then tools are used to move the rock, and they don't really go into a lot of detail how it was cut, but they do give some starter explanations. And then they have this clip with a bit of an interview from a bit of a transcript of a session from the 1980s with Bob Monroe and an anonymous physicist, which sounds very much to me like Tom Campbell, by the way. And he talks about how this energy is, interacts with consciousness, and then they relate this. This is one of the most interesting parts to ancient cultures, which talk about the rocks wanting to be moved and stuff. So that's really interesting that they talk about the rocks having a form of consciousness, and that these stone temples were a sort of a co-creation between humans and the rocks themselves, kind of thing. They don't use that exact phrase, but there's some really, really interesting stuff in here which ties in with what I'm putting in my consciousness book. So a recommended viewing. And then another documentary on their channel called The Other Side of Reality, that goes into Paul Dirac's work and Pauli and some of these theoretical physicists and these wormholes which were postulated by Einstein and Rosen. And then it links this all into a holographic model of the universe. And they then, for example, talk about a Hindu scripture which describes something very, very similar. And then they talk about this. Also, they talk about experiments at the Monroe Institute with this gateway process, which is described in this CIA document, which was released a few years ago. And that's also very worthwhile viewing. This document was written by, oh crikey, I forget, he doesn't name the guy in this documentary, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Dixon or something. It's not Wayne Dixon, but he's mentioned as the author of this document about the gateway process, which was this consciousness expansion experience which they developed at the Monroe Institute in the 80s. And this guy was working for the CIA and stuff. So it's, again, all very, very interesting stuff, and shows how this is all linked together. And this is meant to be a sort of representation of the holographic field, which is apparently described, or the holographic nature of the universe, which is described in one particular Hindu text, which I'm also been writing about. So there's quite a few synchronicities in this for me, in what I've been writing about over the last 6 months or a year. So really good stuff. I recommend all three of those documentaries, and they will take about an hour and a half, 2 hours in total, I think, something like that. 2.25 hours, all three. Very good stuff. And then I just clicked on this one, which I've only just started to watch, on the alternative history of agriculture, which again ties in with the Anunnaki. I don't know if they mentioned that yet, but looks at the ancient Sumer and stuff, and the Sumerians and stuff, and how they seem to have got advanced versions of wheat which were much more productive than wild wheat and stuff, apparently from nowhere. So so check all of those out. Some very good stuff. Then tying in, really, I suppose, just mentioning going back to the UFO one, there's been more movement on the UFO stuff, and I'll just mention this documentary or interview or discussion by Ross Coulthart, who's done some quite good stuff. He did a documentary a couple of years ago which featured Scott and Suzanne Ramsey and their discussion of the crashing Aztec, and he went to the site there. I'm not sure if that documentary is on this 7 News Australia channel, which one it's on, but that's worth viewing. But he talks about the David Grush thing. Now, there's nothing particularly new in this Ross Coulthart thing, but I think what struck me when I watched this, I wasn't going to watch it at first because I thought, it's just going to be all yada yada yada. But the language that he's using seems, stronger. He seems a little bit angry. He's talking about, the cover up and the crimes committed in keeping the cover up going. So that's quite interesting. So the language is evolving slightly, which may be a good thing or it may be a bad thing. But you can watch this, and I quite like Ross Coulthart. Again, I don't know how far down the line he's gone, whether he realises this is all tied into 9/11 or not, and stuff, which of course is the big one. I'm not sure whether he's got that far yet, but we shall see. So that's worth watching. And then Elsa sent me this video a couple of days ago, and I'm just going to play a little clip from this because I was quite surprised to see this, and you'll get why I think it's worthwhile listening to this. This is more about the general disclosure process, and these people are sort of saying, well, there may be a fake disclosure, there may be a full disclosure, but whatever disclosure is happening, it does mean that people are trying to think for themselves more. Yes, some of them are being led astray by people like Greer, but nevertheless, Greer has had a role to play in all of this, and it's certainly his role has been important to me in my personal journey. But I know what Greer is about now. I'm pretty sure I know based on what I've put together in my book and stuff from his own words and things like that. But I wanted just to play a minute of this lady who I've never heard of before this, but this was quite interesting because she kind of admits that she had to change her outlook substantially. So let me just play this so you can hear her own words. It's only a few seconds long, 30 seconds a minute.
I used to tell people, well, I don't study the dark arts. I'm not interested in the dark arts. I don't even want to know about the dark arts. Well, now the dark arts are in my face. Like there's a dark cabal society that you can't be the light without knowing that you're helping people come out of the dark. And this was huge for me to actually even admit, that there were that I needed to learn how to handle that and break free of that. I was just all love and light, new ager, love and light. But there is a need to see what is really going on, and some of it is dark. And
so I thought that was really important that she said, I used to be all love and light, but I didn't want to look at the dark arts, but I had to. That's really important, and the fact that she's got the guts to say that, because this has been a kind of a big problem with the New Age movement generally, that although, that thinking has helped me a lot, the New Age thinking, the positive thinking, that side of things, what has always saddened me a bit is that they don't acknowledge the darker side enough. They might, sort of have a vague acknowledgement of it, but for her to say that, I think that's great. And you see her name, this pseudonym, Joan of Angels. I'm assuming that's not her real birth name, a born name or whatever you want to call it, but you get what I'm saying. So this again might be showing an evolution now that people really are trying to get their handle on the full picture, dark and light, and kind of getting a grip on that so that they can deal with it all. And they're talking about 2030 now being the big disclosure, having moved on from 2012. And one of the guys quite rightly says, well, I heard it all in 2012, and so I'm not putting a date on it now because it just seems pointless. They also talk about timelines and things. So it's a little bit, it's just more of a general discussion. But there's another very articulate speaker, this lady here I've not heard of before. I think she says she's just a waitress or something, but she's a very good speaker, and she talks about how she put these videos on TikTok, and she got a lot of traffic, and this encouraged her to do some more videos and stuff. And from what she says, she's seems to have got a fairly good handle on things in quite a short period of time. So that also seemed pretty good. Again, it's more sort of general stuff, but you can see what you make of that yourselves, and what you get out of it. That video, as you can see, is what, an hour, so it's not too long, and it's quite an interesting discussion to listen to. So I'll leave you with that now, really. And that's about it for this update. I don't really have much else to tell you. Those that might be wondering about Richard D. Hall, for example, um, there are, there isn't really any updates on him. I'm sure he'll post something on his website, as and when. But really, for now, that's all there is from me. So I'm going to say thanks again for your support, for watching. Share if you want to, and let's keep moving forwards.